Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to our second installment of quizzes, Hanukkah quizzes. One of the meanings of the word Chanukkah is A, holiness, B, freedom, C, they rested on the 25th, D, light. One of the meanings of Hanukkah. There are several meanings, but one of them, you say it's A, freedom. Anyone for B?
Freedom is B.
Freedom is anyone for A? Okay, C. No one for C? D. Okay. Yes, what did you say? D? No, it's C. The word Chanukkah is a composite of two words. Chanu, Chaf Hey. Chanu means they encamped. They settled down after the war. Chaf Hey is the Hebrew number 25. So the word Chanukkah actually points to when they stopped fighting. In Judaism, we sometimes find ourselves in a situation where we have to fight for survival. But we don't glorify the fighting itself. We celebrate the resting, the encamping. So Chanukkah is when Chanu, they encamped. They no longer had to be fighting, but they were now able to take a respite from their fighting. Interestingly, there's a famous question. It's probably the most famous Talmudic question because there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of answers to this question. Everyone uses the question as a springboard to get deeper into Chanukkah. The question is, Chanukkah is an 8-day holiday. Why is it 8 days? Because the miracle was that they had enough oil for one night, and it lasted for 8. If you do simple arithmetic, how many days or nights were miraculous? Not 8, 7. Because they had enough oil for one night. So why do we observe it 8 days? That's the classic question. And there are many, many answers. One of the answers, in fact, I think it's the first answer that was given about 700 years ago, is that the first night of Hanukkah, we celebrate the victory over the Syrian Greeks, the military victory. The other 7 nights or days, we celebrate the miracle of the oil. But we celebrate both. So we devote the first night to thank God. Look, we survived the war. We're here now. We're free. And the other 7 is to celebrate the actual miracle of the oil. There are some quote-unquote scholars, I put the word scholars in quotation marks, who claim that the miracle of the oil was invented later and that people started lighting menorahs much later because of that miracle, which is nonsense because the earliest Jewish text after the Bible, most people would say was the Mishnah, but it wasn't. It's a small text quoted in the Talmud. It's called Megillat Ta'anit, Megillas Tainis, the scroll of fasting. It's a small text that contains in it all the days of the year in which miracles occurred, and those are days that are designated as minor holidays. With the destruction of the temple, all of those days were canceled as holidays, except for 2, Hanukkah and Purim. Those are the only rabbinical holidays that were not canceled. Hanukkah was not canceled because it was so well publicized and so much a part of Jewish experience that the rabbis did not want to cancel it, in spite of the fact that the temple was destroyed. Well, in that text, which is about 2,000 years old, and it was written in the times of the Second Temple, it records the dispute between the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai as to what order we light the menorah. We go from 1, 2, up to 8, or from 8 down to 1. But nevertheless, even though we focus mostly on that miracle, we don't forget the fact that we won the war, and our lives were spared, and we obtained religious freedom. Okay, question number 2. The miracle of Chanukkah occurred where? A, it occurred in the Mishkan, the tabernacle the Jews had in the desert. B, the tabernacle of Shiloh. C, the first temple. D, the second temple. D is correct. The second temple. Now, some people are not aware of this, that in the temple, they lit the menorah, the 7-branched menorah, every single day before sunset. And it had to burn all night long. Unlike the Hanukkah menorah that doesn't have to burn all night long. It only has to last a half hour after dark. I might be giving away an answer to one of the other questions. So forget what I said. Strike that out. But in the temple, the menorah had to last all night long. And each one of the branches of the menorah had olive oil in it. Each branch had a half a log. That's probably almost like a half a gallon of olive oil, to last all night long. 3 Jewish practices the Greeks outlawed. They eventually outlawed everything, but they started off with 3. A, these are the 3. Circumcision, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, that's A. B, circumcision, Shabbos, Passover. C, circumcision, kashrut, Jewish dietary laws, tzedakah, charity. D, bar mitzvah, kashrut, and mikvah. Which 3? You say C. Any other guesses? You say A. B. Okay, let's have someone for every answer. The correct answer is A. They banned circumcision, observance of Shabbos, and Rosh Chodesh. Let me explain. Circumcision makes a lot of sense why they would ban. Because, I think I mentioned this last week, briefly, because circumcision has in it 3 ideas that are anathema to the way the Greeks used to think. Number 1, it mutilates the body. At least that's how it's viewed. And the Greeks glorified the body. The Olympics was a way of displaying the beauty of the human body. They used to compete in the nude. So here you're coming and you're destroying part of the body. There's actually a debate in the Talmud between a rabbi and a Greek philosopher, or a Roman actually. It says, why would you destroy part of the human body? God created it with a foreskin. Why would you remove it? And the answer was, why would you take beautiful stalks of grain and grind them and turn it into bread? It's God created the stalks of grain. Why don't we just eat stalks of grain? The answer is God created a world in which He wants us to take the raw material and to transform it into something that's useful. So circumcision means God created the human body defective so that we can perfect it, to make us more perfect. So they didn't like circumcision because of that reason. They didn't like circumcision also because it was a mark that distinguished a Jewish man from the others. That means that we were emphasizing the fact that we are a different people, chosen people, but just being different. And you know what? To this very day, Jews are singled out as being different. I remember, this happened about 30, 40 years ago, there was an attempt by some members of the Polish community to bring some rapprochement between the Poles and the Jews. So they had a whole session, I wasn't there, where they had members of the Jewish community, members of the Polish community, and they had a whole session all morning long, and they broke for lunch. So the person who was speaking, the moderator, the chairman, or whatever his title was, says, okay, we're going to break for lunch. Okay, the Jews line up over here and the Poles line up over here. That was the way of bringing unity. Because you can't get rid of that perception that no matter how different, how much a Jew tries to be the same, you can't really get rid of that perception that we are different. You know why we can't get rid of it? Because we are different. We are different. And that's a topic that we could spend all day talking about. What about Rosh Chodesh? What's on the third reason why they didn't like circumcision is because it occurs on the 8th day when the child is not able to understand what's being done to it. That means the whole idea of a bris, of circumcision, is to create a bond between God and us that transcends logic. The Greeks worshipped logic. They were the inventors of logic, of philosophical research and so on. The idea that you're doing something that transcends logic, and even the number 8, I think I discussed this last week, suggests going beyond nature. 7 is the cycle of nature, 8 goes beyond that. They couldn't fathom, they couldn't accept that. So that was circumcision. What about Shabbos? In the ancient world, the concept of taking off a day was crazy. They used to make fun of Jews, and these Jews, they won't go to work on Shabbos. Because the idea of Shabbos is that it constantly reminds us that God is the creator. And this was something they couldn't tolerate either. They couldn't tolerate the notion that God is the creator, and that as important as it is to work 6 days of the week, we have to recognize one day of the week that we're not in control. And to lose control is something that people who live with control, the idea of conquering, taking over the world, controlling everything, that was something that they couldn't tolerate. And maybe other reasons as well why they didn't like Shabbos. Shabbos is the strongest aspect of Jewish life. There was someone who was not very religious who once commented that more than the Jews kept the Shabbos kept the Jews. This guy who said it was not an observant Jew, but he recognized that Shabbos was the most powerful force, that when the whole world is doing things, the Jew says, you know what? With all due respect to what you're doing, I have a more important role. My role is to spend the day with God, with my family, with my children, with my soul, and I'll get back to work tomorrow. I once heard this from a professor at McGill University, brilliant scientist and researcher who became observant. And one week they were working, he and his colleagues were working on a very important scientific project. They were all wearing their lab coats and working day and night. People didn't go home. And then all of a sudden, Friday afternoon, they look at him and they say, they were incredulous. What are you doing? Because he was dressed in a suit. Like that was like bizarre. And he said, I'm going home to my family to observe Shabbos. He said, in the middle of our experiment? Yes, in the middle of an experiment. We'll come back Sunday. The experiment is not going to run away. They looked at him like he was from another planet. And he looked at them with such compassion and such pity that these people don't have a life. Their work, as important as it was, became their life, and they had nothing outside of that. You can be sure that most of them were not happily married, did not have good families, and so on and so forth. Well, that's what Shabbos is, and that's something that the Greeks couldn't tolerate. And the third thing is Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is simply the first day of the Hebrew month. So what's so terrible about Rosh Chodesh? What do we do on Rosh Chodesh that we don't do all week long? Nothing. The prayers are a little different. So why do they hate Rosh Chodesh? It's a mystery. Why would they care that Jews observe the first day of a month as a semi or minor holiday with a little bit of different prayers? Because what's the concept of Rosh Chodesh? Yeah, I'm sure everyone here has consulted a calendar to know when Jewish holidays occur. That's not the way it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to use calendars. You know, the one rabbi said that when he speaks, he doesn't use a watch, he uses a calendar. But that limits him at least. But we're not supposed to use calendars, ideally. What we're supposed to use is the sighting of the moon. And you know what? The Muslims still keep that. But that comes from Judaism. The Torah tells us that every month we determine the new month based on the sighting of the moon. And the way it worked up until about the 6th century was that people who saw the moon, now the new moon can hardly be seen. It's almost invisible. And you have people who saw the moon, they're asked to come to Jerusalem, where the Jewish Supreme Court resided, to testify that they saw the moon. And they would be interrogated, because the rabbis had to be astronomers. That was one of the requirements of the rabbis of that court. They had to be astronomers, and they knew exactly when the moon was supposed to show up and where in the sky. And they would interrogate the witnesses. And if the witnesses said the moon was here and really it's supposed to be there, they said, okay, get out. Let's see what the other witnesses have to say. Now, if the witnesses didn't arrive, but the new moon, we knew astronomically when the new moon was, Rosh Chodesh would be the next day. It wouldn't be the day that it actually happened astronomically. And who decides when Rosh Chodesh is? The courts decide that. We control time. That's pretty arrogant when Jews say, not only do we control the world, we even control time. Actually, someone said that we control the weather. You know what? They're not so far off. We do have the spiritual control. Of course, God gives us this control, and he says, you will determine when Rosh Chodesh is. Now, dependent on when Rosh Chodesh is, that will determine when we observe our holidays. For example, Passover is on the 15th day of the month. If Rosh Chodesh was declared, let's say, on Sunday, the 15th will be on Sunday, 2 weeks later. But if Rosh Chodesh was declared to be Monday, Passover will start a day later. That's why in the diaspora we have an extra day of every holiday. Why do we have an extra day? Because the new moon was declared where? In Jerusalem. How would people living in faraway country, how would they know? There was no internet, there was no way of communicating. So they started a system of bonfires. They used to light fires on the tops of hills or mountains, and then a few miles away someone would see the bonfire, he would light a bonfire, and within minutes it would spread all over the Jewish world. The Jews were concentrated in Israel and Babylonia, which is now Iraq, and Egypt, and everyone would know when the new moon was declared, and therefore everyone would know when Passover would occur, and likewise the other holidays. That was a problem because there were troublemakers. The Sadducees didn't like the rabbis and didn't like the Jews following the laws of the Torah based on the oral tradition. So what they would do is they would light bonfires whenever they felt like it, and they would deceive Jews. So they had to go to another system of sending messengers. Messengers would travel far and wide to tell people when Rosh Chodesh was declared, and therefore when to observe Passover. But they could only reach certain limits. They couldn't go too far. So anyone who lived outside their limits of their itinerary would have to observe an extra day, just in case the holiday began a day later. So that's why we keep an extra day, even though now we know, but still we keep the tradition of our fathers. That's how the Talmud describes why we keep an extra day now. So that concept that we are in control of time and that we determine the holidays, they didn't like. And secondly, they knew if we mess up Rosh Chodesh, we mess up all your holidays. Jews won't know when to observe the holidays. Number 4, the Jews who supported the Greeks in their attempts at changing Judaism were known as A, Sadducees, B, Karaites, C, Hellenists, D, Hyksos.
Hellenists?
A, you say A? No?
C?
I tricked you because I mentioned the Sadducees a minute before, but the Sadducees were not directly involved. It was the Hellenists. The Hellenists were the Jews who adopted Greek culture And when Jews adopt a foreign culture, they're more radical about it than the non-Jews from whom they borrowed it. When Jews started to worship idols, the pagans said, "You're so creative. We could never have imagined such crazy ideas of idol worship. We perfect everything, whether it's good or bad." It was it was the Hellenists who adopted Greek ways, and they instigated against Jews observing Judaism. So when the war against the Syrian Greeks occurred, the Jews were not only fighting Syrian Greeks, they were fighting Jews. It was a civil war as well. And Hanukkah is not a victory for freedom in the simple sense of the word. You can do anything you want. It was freedom from those who tried to distort Judaism and enable us to observe Judaism the way it was always practiced. That's really the freedom we're talking about. If someone came up and says, "I want to be a Hellenist," that would not be tolerated. So it's not really total freedom of religion. In a secular state, you want total freedom of religion. When you're dealing with the land of Israel, it had to be run in accordance with Jewish tradition, Jewish law. Okay, number 5, the laws of Hanukkah were not included in the Mishnah. The Mishnah contains all the laws that were transmitted orally for centuries, and then they were finally put into writing. And in the Mishnah, you have a volume that deals with the laws of Shabbat. You have a volume that deals with the laws of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. You have a volume dealing with Purim. There's no section in the Mishnah dealing with the laws of Hanukkah. And that's a problem that many commentators noted. And there are several answers given. So why is Hanukkah left out of the Mishnah? A, because it's only a minor holiday. B, the laws of Hanukkah were well known and there was no need to put it into writing. C, Hanukkah occurred after the Mishnah was written. And D, there are no laws for Hanukkah, just customs. So which one is it?
C.
C? No, it's not C. What?
D.
D? No, it's not D. It's C. You know, no one said A. I think I finally got through to everyone that there is no such thing as minor holidays in Judaism. If it's a minor holiday, it's not a holiday. It's only minor in the sense that you're allowed to do work on that day, but it's not minor in its spiritual significance. So it's one of the reasons, it's only one of the reasons given, is that the Mishnah, why was the Mishnah written? The oral Torah was supposed to be oral. Oral means transmitting it by word of mouth and not putting it in writing. So why did they change and put the Mishnah into writing? Because people were beginning to forget. The Mishnah was written at a time that the Romans were persecuting the Jewish people, and Jews were being taken to all parts of the world, far-flung parts. The Romans took the Jews all the way to Germany, to France, to England, and then other Jews were going south to Spain and Portugal, North Africa. Jews were becoming scattered all over, Babylonia, Iraq, Iran, were then called Persia. And the problem with being scattered all over is you don't have contact with the central authorities, with the academies of learning, where all these teachings were transmitted orally. And the danger was that the teachings of the Mishnah would be forgotten. And that's what happens in a lot of places where Jews were isolated and didn't have contact with the centers of learning. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the leader of the Jewish people, decided that this is an emergency thing, that he has to take the bold move of taking what was supposed to be oral, teacher to student, father to son, and so on, and put it into writing. But he wanted to limit that. He put it into writing only where it was absolutely necessary. Things that were well known, he did not put in the Mishnah. For example, he didn't put the laws of tefillin in the Mishnah. Why not? Because everyone knew how to put on tefillin. They did it every day. How to write the tefillin, the scribes were trained in that. That was something, there was no need to tell everybody how to write and put on tefillin. So that's one area, just an example, that Maimonides explains. It was not written in the Mishnah because it was well known. Chanukkah was pretty recent. It was the most recent holiday. The other holiday of Purim happened centuries before that. But Chanukkah was a recent thing, and there are not that many laws that were not familiar to people. Everyone knew how to light their menorah, which they now call hanukiah. So that's why the laws of Hanukkah were not written in the Mishnah. That's one of the explanations given. Another explanation given, a historical one, is that the Romans were very, very upset when Jews would somehow express themselves in rebellious ways, talking about independence. The Romans would treat you nicely if you recognize that they are the masters and you pay your taxes and you speak nicely about Romans. But the minute you started a rebellion, the slightest hint that you're trying to overthrow the yoke of the Roman Empire, they were ruthless. They would wipe you out, men, women, and children, torture you, do everything as bad as what we suffered from the Nazis. The only difference was that if you accepted them, they were nice to you. They allowed you to live. So if we would have celebrated Hanukkah openly, in other words, it would have been in our text. To them that means, oh, you're talking about a rebellious holiday. You rebelled against the Greeks. And that's why he was careful not to put the laws of Hanukkah in the Mishnah. They were still transmitted orally. Later on, they were included in the Talmud, because at that point, there was no longer a danger, if that was the reason. Number 6, women have a custom to do something extra for Hanukkah, beyond what everyone does. And what is it that they do? A, lighting an extra candle. B, giving extra tzedakah, extra charity. C, making latkes, or donuts. We should add for the Israelis. D, desisting from domestic chores while the candles burn.
Whoa.
What?
Whoa.
All? No, that's not a choice.
D.
D. Anyone disagree?
See?
C, making latkes? No, the answer is correct. It's D. That women do not do domestic chores. They can make latkes, but they don't do laundry or sewing or things like that while the candles are burning, or at least for a half hour that the candles burn after dark. What is the reason for that? That's the next question. The reason women have this added observance is because, and there are two correct answers. A, they were oppressed by the Greeks more than the men. B, one of the major turning points in miracles occurred through a woman. C, women are compensated for not having to observe all the mitzvos, so they give them an extra mitzvah. D, women demanded more participation.
A and B.
A and B is correct. They were oppressed by the Greeks more than the men. In what way were they oppressed more than the men? The Greek officials legislated a law that any bride who's getting married has to sleep with the official before she goes to the chuppah, before she goes to the wedding ceremony. And many women were prepared to die rather than doing that, and resisted this terrible decree. So it affected women more than it did men. So women were given an extra measure of observance to show that they really had a greater miracle happening, that they were spared from this terrible fate. And the second one, the turning points, there was a battle, I think I mentioned it last week, there was a battle, a major battle, and it was a turning point in the whole war. And this woman, Yehudis was her name, according to one version, she was a sister of Yehuda HaMaccabee, and she penetrated into the camp of the enemy, and she went to the general, the top general, and she plied him with salty, it's like the biblical story of Yael, with cheese, and he got thirsty, and she gave him wine until he fell asleep, and she killed him. She decapitated him and left the camp. And when the soldiers saw their leader decapitated, they were in disarray, and that was a major turning point in the battle. So it was a woman who's the heroine of the story of Chanukkah. And that's why women are not only, they're obligated, just like men, to be participants in the Chanukkah laws, because women are generally exempted from time-related commandments. Women do not have to, let's say, sit in the sukkah on Sukkot. They could, they're encouraged. Women don't have to hear the shofar, but they do, and they're encouraged to do it. But this is something women are equally obligated because they were major participants, and even more than the men, in the whole story of Chanukkah. Number 8. In Israel, the dreidel consists of the 4 letters A, Nun, Gimel, Hey, Tuf. B, Nun, Gimel, Hey, Pei. C, Nun, Gimel, Hey, Shin. D, Nun, Gimel, Samach, Shin.
D.
The answer is B. We do C, Nun, Gimel, Hey, Shin, but in Israel, it's Nun, Gimel, Hey, Pei. Pei stands for the word po, here. A great miracle happened here. In Israel, you can't say there because it happened where you are in Israel. So you say a great miracle happened here. According to one of the great Hasidic authors, known as the Bnei Yissaschar, the 4 letters have significance. They correspond to the 4 different tyrannical regimes that oppressed the Jewish people, and how they eventually spin and spin and spin and collapse. And he explains that the Nun stands for the word nefesh, soul. The Babylonians tried to destroy the temple and destroyed the temple, the first temple. They destroyed the soul of the Jewish people. Gimel stands for the word guf, body. Who tried to destroy the bodies of the Jews? No, not the Greeks. They all killed us, but what was their objective? It was Persia. Haman was the Persian prime minister, and he sought to annihilate the Jews, their bodies, not their souls, but their bodies. Then you have the Hey. Let's go to the Shin first. The Shin stands for Seichel, because Shin and Sin are interchangeable letters. Seichel means the mind. The Greeks tried to destroy our way of thinking. They were not against our bodies. They didn't want to kill us. When you fight a war, of course, you kill, but that was not their intent. We resisted, so they fought us. They were not out to destroy our soul, although that happened as well. Their major objective was to destroy the way Jews think. There's a way Jews think. They think through the prism of Torah. And sometimes they don't accept what the Greeks consider to be logical and compelling by logic. We sometimes transcend logic, which is what I mentioned before about circumcision. And that's something they couldn't tolerate. The Romans, he says, stands for Hey. Hey is the word hakol, everything. The Romans embodied everything. They wanted to kill our soul, they wanted to kill our bodies, they wanted to kill our intellect. They had everything. I could suggest that the Hey could stand for another word, hergish, feeling. They want to destroy the Jewish feelings, the Jewish heart. Because you have the head, you have the soul, you have the body, but you also have to focus on the heart. And maybe that's what the Hey stands for. When we say Romans, we don't just mean the ancient Romans. When we talk about the Roman exile, it means every power in the world since the destruction of the Second Temple is considered to be part, an extension of the Roman exile. So it includes Christianity, it includes Islam, it includes the Soviet Union and secularism and atheism, all the different isms of the world that have risen against the Jewish people and the Jewish sense of values, they're all considered and lumped together as part of the Roman exile. Because until the third Beis Hamikdash will be built by Mashiach, we are still part of that continuum of exile. And the Romans, therefore, represent by Hakol, it incorporated everything. Every imaginable type of persecution was taken and applied to the Jewish people by the Romans and their heirs and their extensions. 9, the total number of candles we light, except for the shamash, except for the candle that lights all the others, is A18, nice number. B26, another nice number. It's the numerical value of God's name. C36, another beautiful number. It's the numerical value of the word Leah, my wife. D, 49. It's C, 36. If you add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8, you get 36. Okay, the significance of this number 36, is that it corresponds to A, the number of hours Adam experienced the light that God created on the first day. B, the number of ounces the cruse of oil contained. C, the number of Matisyahu, I can't say it in English, grandchildren, Mattathias. When did he change his name from Matisyahu to Mattathias? And when he was in Ellis Island. So we have evidence that Matisyahu came to Ellis Island way before Columbus discovered America. D, the numerical equivalent of the word light in Hebrew is 36. E, the last 2 digits of Yehuda Maccabee's social security number. Everyone thinks it's E. So what is it?
D.
No, not D. Light in Hebrew is R. R is 207.
B.
It's number of ounces the cruse of oil contained. No, didn't contain 36 ounces.
Could be A.
The answer is A. When God created the world on the first day, it says, Yehi Ar, let there be light. Yet, the Torah itself says that the moon and the sun were put into place on the 4th day of the week. So obviously, the light of the first day was a different kind of light. And indeed it was. It was a light that enabled you to see from one end of the world to another. And that light was hidden, because if everyone had access to that, it would be a field day for thieves. They would see everything. They would see where you keep all your valuables. It wasn't a good thing, so God hid it, and only certain very righteous and holy people have access to this light. There were people like the Baal Shem Tov. It was known that he was able to see all over the world. There's a famous story of a woman who her husband disappeared, and she came to the Baal Shem Tov, and I heard the same story about others, and they were able to say exactly where this person was. But this is a spiritual light. It's not just a physical light. And it lasted for 36 hours for Adam and Eve, and then it disappeared. And when Shabbat was over, it disappeared, and he saw darkness for the first time. And that's why, what did he do? He had to create light. And he took 2 stones and rubbed them together, and he created light. That's why at the end of Shabbat, we make Havdalah. We say the prayer to say goodbye to Shabbos with a candle that has at least 2 wicks, because it's to remind us of the creation of fire by Adam's ingenuity, which is a very important lesson, that people sometimes think that natural means that anything that humans touch is not natural. We believe that everything that humans touch is also part of God's world. God gave doctors the knowledge and ingenuity to be able to heal. Where did that come from? It comes from God, planted that possibility, that potential in the minds of people. So yes, things that are raw, that come from God, that weren't touched by human hands, could be sometimes very healthy, and sometimes they could be poison. But God created it. It doesn't make it good just because God created it. Human beings are needed to make the things that God creates useful and not harmful. So Adam creates this fire Saturday night, which we thank God for, the creation of fire. Even though Adam and Eve created it, no, God gave him the ingenuity. But that's a little bit off the subject. But that's the 36 hours. And there are also, 36 also relates to the number of tractates of the Talmud. While the Mishnah has 60 volumes to it, only 36 of them have Gemara, have Talmud, that were preserved to explain the Mishnah. And they're also known that in every generation there are 36 hidden righteous people on whose merit the world stands. The school of 11, the school of Shammai maintains that we should light A, 1 candle each night, B, in descending order, 8, 7, 6, 5, C, 8 candles each night, D, only the first night of Chanukkah, the rest is optional.
B.
C?
B.
No, B is correct. In descending order, the first night we light 8, then 7, then 6, then 5. Misunderstood it.
Yeah.
Initially, the place to put the Hanukkah menorah was, by the way, before I go any further, I once got into a lot of trouble. I used the word Hanukkah menorah to an Israeli, and they said, no, it's not a menorah. A menorah is only 7 branches. It's a hanukiah. Well, hanukiah, I found that there is an ancient source, a few hundred years old, that uses the word hanukiah. But Jews never used that term until the modern state of Israel and the popularization of Hebrew, of making modern Hebrew what it is. We always called it a menorah. A menorah simply means a candelabrum, an instrument that has places for candles or for oil. It could be a Shabbos menorah, it could be a Hanukkah menorah, it could be any menorah. But anyhow, if you want to use the word hanukiah, be my guest. So the place to put the hanukiah initially was A, in the window, B, on the table inside the house, C, on the right side of the entrance to the house, D, on the left side of the entrance to the house. What?
D.
No, not the window. The original place was not the window. Was D, on the left side of the entrance to the house. Why the left side? Because the mezuzah is on the right, and you want to be surrounded with mitzvahs. If, for whatever reason, you don't have a mezuzah, you put the menorah on the right side, because we always prefer the right side to the left.
Facing the house.
What?
It's the right side. Mezuzah's on the right side facing the house.
Facing the house, right. But if some reason, let's say you took the mezuzah off to have it checked, so you don't have a mezuzah there, or for what, you just moved into the house and you didn't have a chance to put the mezuzah, then you put the menorah on the right. Now that was the original place to put it. Something happened. One thing that happened is we live in areas that are very cold. If you put your menorah outside, it's not going to last. It'll blow out in a second. Cold or windy places. When Hanukkah happened, Chicago didn't exist. So they put it outside. But once Jews started to migrate from the Middle East to Europe, to Russia, Poland, Germany, we're talking about a different climate. And they couldn't light the menorah outside. And the second thing that happened, Jews started to live amongst the Gentiles, who were not very friendly to the Jews, to put it mildly. So if a Jew would put his menorah outside, he would find that his menorah was stolen, extinguished, and worse, attacked. So the dilemma created a need to find another place for the menorah. And there were two options. On one hand, we want to preserve the idea of keeping it outside, because the idea of Hanukkah is to publicize the miracle. We also want to preserve the idea of putting it in our doorway. Why is our doorway so important? So number one, to be surrounded with mitzvahs. Number two, and this is not well known, One of the things the Greeks did, I say Greeks, but these were Syrian, who were controlled by the Greek Empire. One of the things the Syrian Greeks tried to do is to wipe out all Jewish practice. They started with three things. They continued to curtail all Jewish practice. So what happened? Jews had to live their Judaism inside their homes. So what did the Greeks do? They took off the doors of every Jewish home. They didn't allow Jews to have any privacy. So that way, Jews could not practice their Judaism inside their homes because they would be detected by the guards that were constantly roving around looking for Jews who were violating their decrees. And these Jews would be taken out and killed. And that's when the loyalist Jews had to flee and run into the mountains and live in caves because they couldn't stay in the cities because they were exposed to the authorities. So one of the reasons we try to do it in the doorway is to remember the fact that our doorways were taken away. We couldn't practice our Judaism because they took away our doors. So what developed was two different customs. Some people started lighting the menorah in the window. That way it's as close to being outside as you can get without actually going outside. And some people developed the custom of doing it inside in a doorway inside the house. So you have your mezuzah on one side and you have your menorah on the other side. The Chabad custom is to do it inside the house. And I think there's also a spiritual reason why we do it inside. In the olden days, the point of division between the inside and the outside was your entrance. You lived your life in your own home. Your life was permeated with holiness, with Judaism, with just positive energy. There was no influx, no intrusion of the outside pagan, immoral world. Unfortunately, we're living in an age where this little toy has brought, and other parts of technology, everything that's bad about the outside world into our own homes, infiltrating our own homes. It started with television, actually. That's probably the most powerful medium that did a lot of damage to the cultural development of the Jewish people, where we became inundated with ideas that are foreign to Judaism, that are antithetical to Judaism. So when we try to light the menorah, what we're trying to say is that this house has the influence from the light of the menorah, the light of Torah, the light of Judaism, and we're not allowing the outside to invade. But the outside has already invaded, so we have to do it inside. The outside is already inside the house. That's a thought that I'd like to suggest. Okay, we're not going to finish all this. Do one more. Two more. I'll do two more. The additional prayer the rabbis instituted to be said during the Amidah prayer
Definitely not A.
on Chanukkah is called,
D.
isn't it not A? A, the Star-Spangled Banner. B, Yala V'Yavo. C, Mo Sur Yeshuati. D, Al Hanisim. D is correct. Many would have said C, because that's also something that people recite after they light the Hanukkah menorah, but it's not recited in the Amidah, the standing prayer. The Hanukkah candles must burn at least A, 18 minutes after dark, B, 30 minutes after dark, C, 36 minutes after dark, D, 1 hour after dark. B is correct. So here's the important piece of information. When do you start lighting the Hanukkah candles? So you can light them actually, technically you could light them about an hour before sunset. But that's a problem. If you do it then, it has to last a half hour after dark. Right now, it gets dark, it's about a quarter after 5, I think. If you light it, the sunset is about 4:30? Yeah. 4:40, about 4:40. So if you light, it has to burn a half hour after dark, and if you light it an hour before sunset, like 3:40, it has to burn until about 5:45. Those candles that they sell, the Chanukkah candles, will not do that. Another problem is, Friday night, you can't light your candles, Hanukkah candles, after sunset, because it's Shabbat. You light it before the Shabbat candles. So Shabbat candles you normally light 18 minutes before sunset. So you have a problem. That's why Friday night, unless you're using olive oil, which can last hours, you should use the Shabbat candles, the big candles. Candles, Hanukkah candles, do not have to be colored. They don't have to be colored in any form or any shape, but those small Hanukkah candles only have enough to last a half hour. Now they do manufacture larger ones, and I think those could probably be used for Friday night. But if you don't have them, use any kind of candle. You can use any, there's no special candles made for Hanukkah that you must use. That's the next one. Hanukkah candles must be different colors, must be red, green, and yellow, must be blue and white, could be any color. The answer, of course, is D. Okay. Any questions? The following two things we may not do on Hanukkah. A, eat meat and drink wine. B, fast and eulogize. C, eulogize and work. D, work and fast.
B.
B is correct. You're not allowed to fast on Hanukkah. Not that too many people are pressuring rabbis. Let me fast on Hanukkah. I want to fast. And God forbid if someone passes away, the rabbi cannot say a traditional eulogy. Instead, you speak. The rabbi says something, focusing mostly on the positive, not trying to awaken feelings of sadness beyond the feelings that people have naturally that you can't control. And because you have to recognize that it's a joyous day, and we shouldn't try to foster and generate any real sadness. But people think that Hanukkah doesn't have too much. Entire volumes have been written about Hanukkah.